and welcome to my booktube channel, my little corner on the internet where we discuss, critique, and analyze books and have book recommendations. I am Ainsley, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope you decide to stick around because I've got a very special one for you. I am going to be sharing 5 of my personal favorites and the ones I believe to be the best Agatha Christie novels featuring the little Belgian detective himself, Hercule Poirot. Now, I know that many people are probably familiar with Hercule Poirot. After all, he is one of the most famous literary detectives of all time. But just in case you aren't as familiar with him, I'm going to give you a little lowdown on who he is before naming my favorite books. First of all, Hercule Poirot appeared in The Mysterious Affair of Styles, published in 1920. This was the first book of Agatha Christie's that was published and the first novel to feature Hercule Poirot. So of course he's a very important part of her career. He also is the recurring character to feature in most books. He is quite popular, and very much like Arthur Conan Doyle's relationship to Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie had a very similar relationship with Hercule Poirot. She actually wrote the last book that featured him way before publishing it because people wanted to see more of him. Hercule Poirot is so popular and so important to people that he was the first fictional character to have an obituary in the New York Times. Hercule Poirot and the books featuring him are really what got the formula of having the detective sit down with the suspects and reveal who the killer is. This is something we see in many works of detective fiction, be it on books or on TV. And so it's very interesting when you can go back and see where all of this began. Of course, there were detective books and detectives that are influential as well, such as the work of John Dickson Carr, the work of Arthur Conan Doyle, and the work of Edgar Allan Poe. But Agatha Christie has really made some of the best characters, more than one, but Hercule Poirot, in my opinion, is certainly the best. And so I wanted to share with you the books that I think are not only the best, but just a really great introduction to this character and her work. I do have another video where I talk about introductions to Christie. I will link that here as well as the description box below, and I'll have a playlist for all these as well. There's something about her work that is so inviting as well as an easy read. It's quite conversational. There's not an over amount of description, even though there is some. And especially in her earlier work, she really seemed to know how to perfectly design and execute a really good mystery. So with all that being said, I am going to take it over to my book recommendations and share with you my personal favorite Agatha Christie novels featuring Hercule Poirot. My personal favorite work of detective fiction, my personal favorite book featuring Hercule Poirot, and my favorite work by Agatha Christie. This is all one book, and that is The Murder of Roger Akroy. This is the 4th book featuring Hercule Poirot, so he's still a relatively new character, and we're really getting to know him through the eyes of someone that is not Inspector Hastings. This book, I highly recommend reading it as if you have never read another work of detective fiction, or you have read detective fiction prior to this book's release, around the time it was released. This has been a very big piece of inspiration for a lot of detective writers of literature and stage and screen and wherever you get your mysteries. And a part of The Murder of Roger Akroy that really gets to me is the narration. It's basically told through the eyes of someone who is new in the life of Poirot, and I think that makes it even more compelling. And yeah, this is one of those ones that's extra hard to discuss without being too spoilery and giving way too much away. The next book I want to share with you is one that I have very nostalgic feelings for. I actually saw the episode featuring David Suchet, or one of the adaptations that feature David Suchet from Agatha Christie's Poirot. I remember this is not the first one I saw, but the first one I remember seeing, as well as the first one that I remember when the previews were happening on PBS. And to top it all off, this was the first book of Agatha Christie's that I bought for myself, and that is Murder in Mesopotamia. Now, Murder in Mesopotamia is set in Mesopotamia. It has archaeology, and there are many other books that have archaeology in them because she was inspired by her second husband, who was an archaeologist. This became a heavy influence on her work at the time, and one of those is Murder in Mesopotamia, and it's my favorite of that lot as well, but this one holds a really nostalgic place in my heart. Overall, the atmosphere, Hercule Poirot's connection to the case, and the fact that it deals with multiple timelines. It doesn't really exist in multiple timelines, but it deals with something of the past coming into the future, and that is something that I think Agatha Christie does really well, and it also happens to be done in Murder in Mesopotamia as well. The third book on this list is my personal favorite seasonal book by Agatha Christie, as well as my favorite holiday book by Agatha Christie. Though she doesn't have many, she does have a couple, and the one that wins out, the one that I chose, is Halloween Party. Now, Halloween Party can be a bit triggering for some, as unfortunately, I don't know how spoilery this is, but let's just say that the victims are a lot younger than they typically are in a Christie novel, and so just be aware of that. This is quite dark, so it's not this fun Halloween-y book, but I love a good Halloween story. I love a good autumnal story, so if you're into that type of thing, I think Halloween Party will do you some good. The fourth book that I want to share with you that's my personal favorite is a book that takes us to the seaside where Hercule Poirot goes on a little vacation, and that is Evil Under the Sun. Hercule Poirot goes on a vacation alone where he begins to feel that something just isn't quite right. As a matter of fact, there is evil in the air. Evil under the sun. A actress ends up dying while he is there, and he investigates her murder, and there is no shortage of suspects at this hotel, including as well as the person who owns the hotel being a suspect. The only person there who isn't really is Hercule Poirot, of course. This has a great setup, structure, wonderful atmosphere. It's very beachy, great for the spring and summer. We're in spring, we're in summer. If you are on this side of the globe, I'm in the US. A lot of hand gestures there, sorry. But I'm a really big fan of Evil Under the Sun. I'm also a really big fan of both the Agatha Christie's Poirot series adaptation of this, as well as the one featuring Peter Ustinov. Though he isn't my personal favorite, David Suchet is, I do think that's a really good version. Also, if you happen to read this book and think, I feel like I've read this book before, and you're getting a little deja vu, it's because there is a story called Triangle at Rhodes, also written by Agatha Christie, and the stories are incredibly similar. I feel like this isn't something that just happens with Agatha Christie, it also happens with a lot of other authors of the time, where they have short stories or shorter novels in which they make into a full-length novel where the story is quite similar. There's other books by her like this, but the Triangle at Rhodes and the Evil Under the Sun novels are a lot more similar. So just be aware of that. And the last but certainly not least book on this list is Sad Cyprus, featuring Hercule Poirot. He is again alone in this, no Hastings to be found, no Miss Lemon, no Inspector Japp. Is that correct? That is it, right? Inspector Hastings, Inspector Japp? Anyway, so Hercule Poirot is alone at it again, and he has to investigate a crime in which a wealthy aunt and her niece are murdered, and the person who has been arrested and is currently on trial for the crime is innocent. And Poirot knows this, and so he's investigating it to get her off trial, because if she is found guilty, she could end up being hanged. This is a common theme through a lot of Agatha Christie's work, is people who have been wrongfully arrested, accused, convicted, and unfortunately sentenced to death, and they either die or they don't. And so you'll have to read this book to find out if this one has a happy ending or not. If you are a first-time reader of Agatha Christie, you will find that her books are quite accessible to people of many different strengths. They do move quite along, they're very conversational, they're not heavy with description, though there is some, and she allows you in on everything to give you the clues that you need. You'll find that maybe in some of her later work, especially those featuring Hercule Poirot, she was more phoning it in because she wasn't really into Hercule Poirot at that time. She spent so much of her time writing stories featuring him that she really enjoyed writing other stories, specifically ones with no recurring characters. So it's unfortunate that we have some books that aren't really up to par. I do highly recommend checking out her earlier work featuring Hercule Poirot or her earlier work featuring other characters, but those featuring Hercule Poirot are definitely at their best in their earliest forms. But that doesn't consider the fact that Curtain is also an incredible novel. If you ever want to give that one a read, I highly recommend reading other Hercule Poirot books before reading that one, but that one is quite dark and sinister and shocking and really just all of those words that you can think of. If you have any questions regarding Agatha Christie or Hercule Poirot, or you have anything you want to share with me, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to know what your favorite books featuring the Belgian detective is, as well as who is your favorite Agatha Christie detective or recurring character. What is your favorite book or your favorite 5 books? Please let me know. And if you like this video and want to see more like this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you just like me and want to stick around, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post if you want to. I would love to have you around here. And if you have any recommendations or things you want to see, please feel free to let me know. Have a good day.